The 1960s was a time when doctors recommended cigarettes, children were left home alone for entire Saturdays, and nuclear bomb tests were advertised like parades. And that's just the warm-up. Let's take a time-traveling stroll through the everyday horrors of the 60s. The kind of stuff that would make a modern-day parent, doctor, or HR manager gasp, tweet, or file a complaint. You may laugh, you may cringe, and if you were around back then, you'll probably nod and say, "Yep, that happened." People watched nuclear bomb tests like they were fireworks. You know how today, if there's even a rumor of radiation, people buy iodine pills and flee into the mountains? In the 1960s, the reaction was more like, "Honey, grab the kids! They're testing a nuclear bomb at 10 a.m. Let's go watch the mushroom cloud." No, seriously, the US government routinely detonated nuclear weapons above ground in places like Nevada, and civilians were not just aware, they were invited to watch. Hotels in Las Vegas advertised atomic views, families packed picnic baskets and sat on their car hoods like they were tailgating a football game. Only the halftime show was a thermonuclear explosion. People would ooh and ah as the sky lit up, blissfully unaware that radioactive fallout was drifting into their towns, their crops, and their lungs. Nobody wore protective gear. Sunscreen maybe? Hazmat suits? Please. This was the era of grit builds character, even if it glowed in the dark. Women needed a husband's permission to open a bank account or apply for a credit card. Imagine walking into a bank today asking to open a checking account, and the teller responds with, "Sure, sweetie, just bring your husband in to sign off." That was real life for women in the 1960s. Back then, being married didn't just mean shared tax returns, it meant that legally, you were a financial sidekick. Women couldn't get a credit card, a mortgage, or sometimes even a department store account without their husband's written permission. Single, divorced, widowed. Too bad. You better find a man or stash your cash in a coffee tin. It wasn't until 1974, yes, 70s, that the Equal Credit Opportunity Act made it illegal to deny credit based on gender, so until then, women had to ask their husbands for permission just to buy a couch on layaway. The 1960s, where marriage came with vows, house keys, and co-signing rights. Being gay could land you in jail, or worse. The 1960s were not kind to anyone outside the heterosexual white picket fence mold. If you were gay or even suspected of being gay, you could be fired, harassed, arrested, or forced into treatment that ranged from cruel to absurd. Being seen holding hands with someone of the same sex could get you picked up by police. Bars that served gay patrons were regularly raided, and the medical world, let's just say psychiatry, had a very long learning curve. This was also the era when "don't ask, don't tell" would have been considered progressive. Being out wasn't just risky, it could destroy your entire life. That's why Stonewall in 1969 wasn't just a riot, it was a rebellion. And it took decades for things to begin shifting. Today we swipe right. Back then, people risked everything for love or even friendship. It's sobering, to say the least. Doctors recommended cigarettes to ease stress and control weight. Once upon a time, and by once we mean the 1960s, you could walk into a doctor's office, complain about stress, and walk out with medical advice that sounded like, "Try a nice filtered cigarette, maybe 2. It'll calm your nerves and keep the pounds off." That's right. The same people who took your temperature and checked your reflexes were out here recommending Lucky Strikes like they were vitamins. Cigarettes weren't just accepted, they were practically prescribed. Ads showed doctors, real or actor doctors who could tell, puffing away while explaining how smooth their preferred brand was. Some even claimed cigarettes helped digestion. Imagine lighting up after a colonoscopy today. And it wasn't just the doctors. Pregnant women smoked, teachers smoked in class, airline pilots smoked in the cockpit, and you could smoke in hospitals. Hospitals! Like while waiting for your X-ray results, you could give yourself another reason to need an X-ray. People drove drunk, and nobody thought it was weird. You know what used to be the ultimate accessory for a night out in the 1960s? A buzzed driver behind the wheel. Drunk driving wasn't just tolerated, it was almost expected. Had a few highballs at dinner, just squint harder at the road, left a party tipsy, roll down the window and call it fresh air. Police might pull you over and say, "You all right to drive, buddy?" And if you could form a full sentence, they'd send you on your way. There were no breathalyzers in cruisers, no Uber, no designated driver campaigns. The idea that you shouldn't drive after drinking was considered kind of uptight. Unless you hit something, or someone, the consequences were minimal. You might get a fine, or a chuckle, or advice to sleep it off. People joked about it. They bragged about it. It was just another night out. Today, drunk driving is a public health campaign. In the 60s, it was basically part of the menu. Women were fired for getting pregnant, or just married. Back in the 1960s, getting married was a magical event. You got a ring, a white dress, and, if you were a working woman, a pink slip. Employers were not exactly subtle about it. You could be the best teacher in the district, but the minute someone spotted a wedding band or a baby bump, you were out faster than you could say maternity leave, which, by the way, did not exist. In many workplaces, just being engaged made your boss nervous. After all, you might be thinking about kids someday, and that made you unreliable. Can't have a woman distracted by her womb trying to answer the office phone, and if you did get pregnant and tried to work through it, you'd be politely encouraged to disappear quietly before you made the customers uncomfortable. You know, because nothing says terrifying like a visibly pregnant woman being competent at her job. Kids were left alone, everywhere, all the time, without a second thought. It's not that people in the 1960s didn't love their kids. They just had a very different definition of watching them. Children were set loose in the morning with a vague, be home by dark, and maybe a sandwich. No phones, no GPS, no helmets, no problem. If you came back in one piece and didn't bleed on the carpet, you were doing great. Parents left kids in cars while they shopped. Crack a window, you'll be fine. At home alone with instructions like, don't answer the door unless it's grandma or the fire department, and roaming unsupervised through neighborhoods, construction sites, and the occasional storm drain system. Today, letting your 10-year-old walk a block alone might trigger a neighborhood Facebook thread. In the 60s, your mom might yell, "Don't forget your slingshot," as you biked off to Lord knows where. Schools handed out spankings, with belts, paddles, and zero chill. Today, if a teacher so much as raises their voice too loud, someone's pulling out a smartphone and calling a parent. But in the 1960s, you could get smacked with a wooden paddle before lunch, and your parents would back the school up. Corporal punishment wasn't just allowed, it was standard operating procedure. Teachers had paddles hanging on the wall like trophies. Principals kept belts in drawers. Some schools even let gym coaches get in on the action, because who better to instill discipline than the guy with a whistle and a grudge? And this wasn't just a last resort situation. Talking back, passing a note, chewing gum, boom, you were bent over a desk faster than you could say, "It wasn't me." There were no parental consent forms, no formal hearings, just the sound of a paddle and the phrase, "This hurts me more than it hurts you," echoing down the hallway. Some of the tools had names, like actual names. Board of Education? That wasn't just a clever pun. It was what they called the thing they hit you with. Parents? Oh, they were in full support. Many had the same thing going at home. In fact, you'd sometimes get double punished. Once at school, then again when you got home for embarrassing the family. These days, that kind of discipline would lead to lawsuits, media coverage, and a nationwide debate. But in the 60s, it was Tuesday. Teens were shipped off to reform schools for being pregnant or too rebellious. In the 1960s, if a teenage girl got pregnant, or, let's be honest, talked back too much, there was a solution. Ship her off somewhere until she was better. Enter the reform school. These weren't reforming much unless you count forced silence and shame as character building. A girl could be sent away for being fast, moody, or just for liking the wrong boy. Parents were told it was for her own good, but really, it was about making sure the neighbors didn't talk. And once there, let's just say the curriculum wasn't focused on SAT prep. These places were often run with strict rules, harsh discipline, and very little oversight. Girls might return months later, quieter and changed, though rarely in the way anyone hoped. Today, we'd call that a therapy emergency. Back then, it was just how you kept up appearances. Job ads could say men only or women only, and guess who got paid less? Flip open a newspaper in the 60s job market and you'd find listings like men wanted, executive role, $800 per week. Women wanted, secretary, $125 per week, plus typewriter use. Companies didn't just prefer men for certain jobs, they legally advertised it. Want to be a lawyer? Check the Men Wanted column. Interested in teaching kindergarten? That's over in Women Wanted. Different columns, different expectations, wildly different pay. And if a woman dared apply for a man's job, she might get laughed out of the building, or more politely told, "Don't you want something more fitting? Like fetching coffee or smiling at clients while being grossly underpaid?" It wasn't until 1964 that the Civil Rights Act banned this kind of thing, but it took a while for the message to get to HR. Equal pay, equal opportunity. Those were seen as charmingly idealistic concepts, kind of like flying cars or polite toddlers. Live animals were sold at department stores, or given away as prizes. Yes, you heard that right. You could walk into a department store in the 1960s and walk out with a live monkey, or a turtle, or if you were really lucky, or very unlucky, a baby alligator. It sounds like the setup to a cartoon, but nope, this was retail reality. Stores sold exotic pets like they were blenders. You'd see tanks full of tiny turtles in the toy aisle, birds in cages near the checkout, and sometimes actual monkeys in diapers being promoted as the perfect family pet. And if you didn't want to buy one, just win one. Fairs, carnivals, even grocery store raffles gave out live animals as prizes. Step right up, toss a ring, win a goldfish or a lizard. What could possibly go wrong? Today we have regulations, animal welfare laws, and basic common sense. Back then we had kids bringing home iguanas in shoeboxes and moms just quietly dealing with it. Widespread use of DDT, sprayed on crops, lawns, and even on kids at the beach for fun. Nothing says summer like sunshine, warm sand, and being sprayed with industrial pesticides. Enter DDT, a miracle chemical that killed bugs dead and unfortunately did a number on everything else too. In the 1960s, DDT was sprayed from trucks, planes, and even on children at the beach to ward off mosquitoes. That's right, families lined up as if it were sunscreen, and kids danced in clouds of it like it was a frolic through a chemical mist. Lawn care commercials proudly showed men coating their yards like they were icing a cake. Crops were saturated, entire neighborhoods were fogged like bad movie sets. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring came out in 1962 and said, "Hey, maybe let's not drench the entire planet in poison?" But it took a while for people to catch on. Until then, DDT was practically a seasoning. And there you have it, a wild ride through the good old days that weren't always that good. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this. And hey, if you've got a story from the 60s that would make Gen Z faint, drop it in the comments and check out the next video.